Welcome, everyone, to Mondays with Michael. I'm Dr. Michael Gaeta, your host. Greetings to you from Boulder, Colorado. I wish you all a happy Christmas season and holiday season. So good to be with you today. Bentley is joining us here. He's wanted to be in on the show today, so he wanted to say hi. And let's check in. Whatever platform you're viewing us on, please let us know who you are and where you're calling from. Anything you'd like to share with the group would be great. We'd love to hear from you. So don't be shy. You can just jump right into the chat on whatever platform you're on and say hello. We'd love to hear from you. So today we've got it's been some weeks when we haven't had a guest. So there's a lot to catch up on. And happily so, a lot of amazing developments and in the natural health community. And we're going to dive in on that. So if you haven't been with us before, a warm welcome. If you've been with us over the last 5.5 years, welcome back. And so good to be with you. So this is an offering of the Gaeta Institute. Our motto here, as with the Clinic for Chinese and Functional Medicine, is nature first, drugs last. And what does that mean? Drugs aren't bad, they're just overused massively. And there's a natural solution for any pharmaceutical prescription, at least. I mean, it's a very low estimate, 95% of the time. That's certainly what I've seen over the last 35 years of having a family practice and working with thousands of patients with a lot of different concerns. This is show number 293, and this is a podcast devoted to two subjects of natural health and health freedom. Those are the two things we kind of riff on here. And as always, if you're on our watch page at michaelgaeta.com/watch, or if you're on our backup Zoom link, you can certainly put any questions you have for today in there. But whatever platform you're on, we're streaming on about 10 different platforms and pages. You can please share what you have to share with the group. You may have come across an article or a post or a podcast or something that you would like to share with the group. Please do so. We'd love to hear from you. All right, and as always, please stay in touch on our social media platforms for the Gaeta Institute and Michael Gaeta. And also, you can peruse our course catalog and also have a consultation here at the clinic. So with that, we've got a bunch to share today. All good news. We're going to launch with and really one of the things we want to do today is really jump into some of the many MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, wins that we've been having, which have been absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure behind the scenes has been just intense because the resistance to bringing actual data, evidence, statistics into the health field, especially related to vaccines, has been intense. Pharma, which controls the mainstream media, has been freaking out. The mainstream media, which is controlled by pharma through their ad dollars, has been freaking out. And it's been wild what's been happening. It's really been incredible. So there's a bunch to share. Most amazing, well, not most amazing, one of the most amazing things was the convening of the newly reformed Advisory Council on Immunization Practices. So this has been around for a while, and it's been a pharma front group. Just simply, it's been a rubber stamp for the vaccine industry for decades. And they never say no to a new vaccine. They always say yes, and they always keep adding more to the schedule. I had all my shots, being born in 1969, and a full complement of shots then was 6. I don't even think I had that many. Maybe it was 5. But it wasn't more than 6 back then. And today, depending on how you count it, there's a couple of different variables and options. Kids now, by age 2, are looking at 79 vaccines, or some given in combination. So this is completely insane. If we bother to look at data, which again the media hates data, hates evidence, because this is why the vaccine cult is freaking out, and the facade coming down, and the house of cards toppling, and all of the analogies you could use. The countries that don't vaccinate as much, like all of Europe, is about 50 to 75% fewer vaccines, at the most a third less. They have no increase in deaths from any of the vaccinated diseases. So there's no real data to support this program. That's just one example. There are hundreds. But this has been based on propaganda, statistical manipulation, fear, coercion. It's a cult. And you know, the way you know it's a cult is you're not allowed to question it. One of the vaccine cult leaders, Dorit Reese, who's a lawyer in California, and I didn't know this, she stated that the Dr. Prophet, Paul Offit, who made like $200 million voting to approve his own vaccine that he developed, and his successor, basically Peter Hotez in Texas, were invited to testify and be part of the recent hepatitis B and other issues hearings, and they refused. So they didn't show up. They were invited, apparently, as confirmed by one of their close vaccine cult members, this lawyer who called for the top autoimmune researcher on the planet, Yehuda Schoenfeld in Israel, to be fired from all of his faculty positions as a professor, because he published a textbook and other articles that vaccines definitely cause autoimmune disease. It's one of the reasons the U.S. is the autoimmune capital of the world. We have at least double the autoimmune disease of any developed country because of the glyphosate and the processed foods and the ridiculously large, ever increasing until now, vaccine schedule. So this has been a huge development. So let me just put this up for you. So this was, let's see, here it is. So this is from Bobby's official HHS secretary page on X, Secretary Kennedy. And this was the, several things happened. The first was the ACIP meeting. Well, let me back into it with that. Actually, that would be a good intro to this. And the big news is that the CDC voted in favor of delaying the hepatitis B vaccine for infants under 2 months old. And again, this is the new ACIP panel made of non-pharma operatives. Previously, they were all had deep financial ties to the vaccine industry. They were given blanket waivers for conflicts of interest every year. So they didn't even have to disclose their financial ties to the vaccine industry that they were voting on the products of. So this was ultra corruption and has resulted in the injuries and deaths of millions of American children. This totally corrupt panel is no longer corrupt. Yay. So that's a good thing. Here is the awesome Bob Malone, Dr. Robert Malone, who's a vaccinologist and a virologist. who helped develop. He was one of the key players, if not the most important player, in developing the nefarious mRNA technology, which he has since, stated, has been a complete failure in implementation because it's caused so much harm. But anyway, let's take a look at this, and this is from CDC. This is sort of surreal because all we've heard for decades from CDC is a continuous stream of lies, like just ongoing, nonstop lying. And so to actually hear something that's not a lie from the CDC is sort of surreal. It's just, I'm still adjusting to this idea that the CDC will publish something that isn't a lie. It's sort of a novel experience in a good way. So let's listen to Bob Malone, again, who has helped develop vaccines for decades as a vaccinologist and virologist. He has had his own great awakening, his own personal awakening. The world is going through a cycle of a great awakening. And Malone, like McCullough and others, have had their own personal awakenings to the endless lies of the vaccine cult. So anyway, let's listen without further ado.
Let's proceed to vote then. I'm going to call the roll. Dr. Pollack, on vote on question 2, yea or nay, and whether you have COI.
Raymond Pollack, I vote no, and no conflicts of interest.
Dr. Stein.
Catherine Stein, no conflicts of interest, and I abstain.
Abstain. Dr. Levy.
Retzef Levy, I vote yes, no conflicts of interest.
Dr. Pebsworth.
Vicki Pebsworth, no conflicts of interest, I vote yes.
Dr. Malone, no COI, yay. Dr. Griffin.
Dr. Griffin, no conflicts of interest, I vote yes.
Dr. Blackburn.
Hillary Blackburn, no conflicts. I support looking at studies. I vote no on this language.
Dr. Pagano.
Dr. Pagano, no conflicts, yes.
Dr. Meissner.
I vote no.
COI?
I have no conflict of interest, strong no.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Hiblin. Dr. Hiblin, you're on mute again. I appreciate that you do that, but we need to hear your voice. You're still muted, Dr. Hiblin.
Thank you, sir.
There we go.
Thank you for your acknowledgement. I will try to improve my behavior. I have no conflicts of interest, and I vote no.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Milhound.
Hi, Kirk Milhound, no conflicts of interest. I vote yes.
Okay, what is our head count DFO? One moment.
So this is on hepatitis B.
So we have a vote for the record of 6 in favor, 4 opposition, and 1 abstain. The motion passes.
So what that did was it removed the ridiculous within hours of birth hepatitis B recommendation for newborns. Now, this is significant. Stephanie Seneff, like decades ago at this point, pointed out that the hepatitis B vaccine was a likely cause of autism based on the evidence, one of the causes. And hepatitis B, by the way, is a liver viral infectious condition that affects almost exclusively IV drug users and sexual contact. So as you know, most newborns are promiscuous IV drug users and need this vaccine. By the way, this is in addition to the fact that babies don't make antibodies. They have no humoral or acquired or adaptive immunity. There are 6 areas of the immune system. It's only around age 1, roughly, that babies develop humoral or antibody-mediated immunity. So to give a baby a drug that only has one function, which is to stimulate antibody production, in a baby that can't make antibodies, has never been defended. as why that makes sense. And so that's a general concept, that giving babies before a year old any vaccine is really dumb because it ignores basic immunology. In addition, infants are at supremely low risk unless the mother has hepatitis B, which is a vanishingly small number. And so the risk of the vaccine is way greater than the risk of hepatitis B. So this was a big deal. And this led into this initial post that we'll go into now, which is and this is from Bobby Kennedy, HHS secretary, much to the dismay of the vaccine cult. And I think he would have done more. As I've said here many times, I think this is what Bobby wants to do, and this is what Bobby's allowed to do. And I think he's continually pushing to do more within the constraints which he is under. And there's a lot of speculation as to where those constraints are coming from. Susie Wiles, chief of staff, others, hard to say. I don't really know. But clearly, Bobby, I think, based on what we know in the books he's published and his speeches and writings, and would like to do more in this area, particularly getting rid of the COVID shots, which are catastrophic and useless. That, I think, is probably a big no-fly zone that he's been given, but I think he's still pushing at it at the same time. So anyway, Bobby published this on X 3 days ago. So this is December 5th, and he was replying to a Truth Social from the president. So this was December 5th. We saw the actual vote happen, 6-4, in favor of ending this recommendation, which has had no scientific basis ever. Today, the CDC Vaccine Committee made a very good decision to end their hepatitis B vaccine recommendations for babies, the vast majority of whom are at no risk of hepatitis B, a disease that is mostly transmitted sexually or through dirty needles. So that was huge right there, saving children. And by the way, they did this in Japan, I think decades ago at this point, with no adverse effects to the population. It's not like there was a hepatitis B epidemic once Japan delayed this and other vaccines. There's no adverse effects to ceasing or delaying vaccines, only benefit. Now, this was like an atom bomb, or at least a large grenade thrown into the vaccine cult camp, is the next thing. The American vaccine schedule has long required 72 jabs for perfectly healthy babies, far more than any other country in the world, far more than is necessary. In fact, it is ridiculous. Many parents and scientists have been questioning the efficacy of this schedule, as have I. That is why I've just signed a presidential memorandum directing HHS to fast-track a comprehensive evaluation of vaccine schedules from other countries around the world and better align the U.S. vaccine schedule so it's finally rooted in the gold standard of science and common sense. I'm fully confident that Bobby Kennedy and the CDC will get this done quickly and correctly for our nation's children. Thank you for attention to this matter. Make America healthy again. So this was astounding, absolutely astounding. I can just imagine. So this is Bobby reposting them. Thank you, Mr. President. We're on it. And that's just an astounding development, that they're looking at the entire schedule. Bob Malone affirmed that they're going to look at the entire vaccine schedule, which has murdered and injured millions of American children since it was even just in the last 35 years, since it was so massively expanded. based on the 1986 Immunity Act. If the products were so safe, why would they need immunity for decades, right? Hepatitis B, if it's so safe, why does it need immunity, right? You can't sue the manufacturer. So these are two of the biggest things, and so this is, huge. I believe what's going to come out of this is what we've known for decades, that there's no developed country on earth, and they tend to follow CDC. Even with that, they have not instituted as many vaccines in the childhood schedule as the United States, with no ill effects. For example, in Germany, they have less vaccination against measles than we do here, MMR. It's the this is a great one. One of my favorite pieces of artwork is Norman Rockwell's The Four Freedoms. This is freedom of speech. I have it on my wall. It's behind. You can't see it because we've got a Christmas tree in front of it. But it's one of my favorite pieces of art is The Four Freedoms. Freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And somebody photoshopped Bobby's face onto this freedom of speech painting from the great Norman Rockwell. So pretty remarkable. And this is what I was talking about before. In 1962, there were 5 doses. So I guess I got 5 doses. That's what I was thinking. In 1969. Expanded to 24 doses in 1983. And now it's 94 doses by age 18. There is no other country in the planet that does anything close to this. And they have no ill effects. So there's no downside. In Germany, they give less measles vaccines. They have more cases of measles, who cares, and no increase in mortality. And they have less measles vaccination, which means the kids are less sick, getting fewer MMR, which is one of the most reactive vaccines there is. So it's pretty awesome. The comments on this have just been great. Here's all the needles going into a baby by the age of, or child by the age of 6, and this doesn't even, and anyway, and it gets bigger than this. There's lots of options. I don't see the COVID shot here. I might be missing that. That's in there too, yeah. So here's a young man, 17. This boy died after his first Pfizer. Anyway, and I'll give you the link here, so you can go, see all of this yourself. Yeah, there is still a pharma influence there, for sure. And, yep, hepatitis B plus glyphosate, a huge issue because of the depletion of glutathione, is one of the issues. That happens with acetaminophen, Tylenol as well. So it's a big thing. So there's the link. I'm going to put this on our watch page as well, so everybody can jump in there. And if you have, and yeah, greetings, Gail and Donna, everybody who's here today. We've got hundreds of folks viewing on our streaming platforms. We're on X, we're on Rumble, Twitch, Facebook. We're all over the place. So lots of folks hearing the good news today, so to speak, and that's a good thing. So there's that, and that was pretty massive, and of course the mainstream media is freaking out, and they're trying to do as much damage control as possible, and it's amazing. And this is actually this is the I've said this many times. What's happening now is a populist realignment. So we have the populist left and the populist right uniting against the actual problem. The dichotomy is not left-right, but top-down. It's the elites, the tyrannical forces at work in in industry and in the Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Pharma, all of this, big food, big ag, and it goes on and on, controlling instant and mainstream media, So that's really, the issue here. Populism reframes the struggle to good versus evil, not left versus right. The people versus the elites, by whatever name called, is the actual struggle. So the left-right thing is a thing. There's a vast, chasm in values on many issues, but the issue is, and we see this now, clearly. You just watch what pharma is doing. They're freaking out and bringing on all their usual stooges from the vaccine cult to try to do something about what's happening. Bobby's getting attacked daily, trying to undermine him, have him removed, all of that. I don't think that's even slightly possible. So let's hear from Bobby himself. And this was, actually before that, I had another one. This is the great Aaron Siri, who's really become very prominent for good reason. He just published a book, Vaccines, Amen. And he, just demonstrating, what I've been saying for years, that the vaccine industry and all of its lackeys, it's a cult. He calls it a religion. But it's not science, obviously. It's a cult. So anyway, let's hear a short excerpt from Aaron, echoing some of the things I said earlier.
Why do we need the 1986 Act if vaccines are so safe too? Why does a product need immunity if it doesn't cause harm? And why does products that have been on the market for why do products that have been on the market for decades, like the hepatitis B vaccine, still need that immunity? Do we still not know they're safe enough to lift the immunity on those products? Look, drug products that have very limited markets, tiny markets, that are given to very few people that have really bad adverse event profiles, can still be sold profitably. Why? Pharma companies typically need to do two things. Number one, they need to make the product as safe as technologically feasible. And by doing so, they avoid design defect claims, which is the primary way you hold a company accountable for harms from their product. The type of claim you can never bring for a childhood vaccine. The second way is they disclose the risks that product can cause, and hence they avoid failure to warn claims. Those are the two primary claims that would be levied against a pharmaceutical company. I do not understand, well, I shouldn't say that. It's not true. There's probably a reason that this immunity still needs to continue for these products. And pretending that that reason doesn't exist is not going to make the problem any better, and it's not going to safeguard the kids that are injured by these products.
Whoa, was that awesome? Great. I mean, so succinct, and he's really nailing the nail on the head, so to speak. And this is huge. And just common sense. Why, if they were so safe, why would they need blanket immunity? Well, we know why, because President Reagan, not his finest hour, and Congress were pressured by pharma in 1986 to pass the Immunity Act because they were losing their shirts. They were losing $20 in downstream liability, lawsuits, children injured, children killed, so that it was no longer profitable to produce vaccines. So the solution was, and President Reagan raised this, but for some reason, I don't know all the details, went along with it and signed it into law. Rather than say, hey, why don't you just make them safer, which he did say, somehow something happened where he and Congress were bullied into granting them immunity because they threatened to stop making vaccines. So a sane response would have been fine. Stop making vaccines until you can prove that they're safe, and make them safe enough so that you don't get sued into oblivion, which is what was happening. So that would have been a rational response. We're getting sued. Okay, then figure out why and stop doing that. But no, and they gave the vaccine makers permanent immunity from any vaccine claims. You can't sue the manufacturer, you have to sue the government. And Bobby spoke on the campaign trail at length about the vaccine, so-called vaccine court, which is very corrupt as well. And basically, a regular citizen is suing the government and defended by the Department of Justice. That's a pretty daunting task, and why there's such a low success rate. Many have succeeded. For example, I was teaching a vaccine seminar and talking about the immune system and vaccines one day years ago in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Beautiful city, beautiful area, northern Idaho, gorgeous. And just super nice people there, and we had a packed house, about 100 practitioners there to learn about the immune system, learn about vaccines. And and back in the day, when you could speak about controversial subjects as a standard process speaker, which I did very thankfully. I was delighted, just so thankful to be able to do that for 25 years and become, the most effective speaker in the company. So I was very delighted to do that. And so this was enough years ago that standard process, and it was actually the rep. This is back when the reps just, kind of chose their speakers and such. So I was speaking a lot on vaccines at a standard process seminar on the immune system. And they knew, this is just, they knew what I did, so they were into it. Anyway, those days are long gone, understandably. I mean, it's a hot topic, there's a risk involved. But anyway, this doctor raises her hands, chiropractor, which is, kind of the main attendee at my standard process seminars. There's a chiropractor, and said, or either she was chiropractor or staff, I don't recall. But this woman got up and said, I took my baby to get all of her shots. And I think she was 2 months old, so the 2-month shots. So 2-month-old little baby got a raft of these poison injections. Massive amount of aluminum, given on any visit, way, thousands of times more than what even FDA considers safe to be injected. Ingested and injected are a lot different in terms of aluminum toxicity and other things. So this is injected. And by the way, the old FDA, the ultra-corrupt FDA, would explain that away and say, oh, no, our upper limit is much higher than what children receive. And if you drill down into it, it was ingested, consumed orally, aluminum, most of which is cleared by the liver on first-pass metabolism because it's so toxic. And so they used ingested aluminum safety studies for injected aluminum in vaccines. It's pretty messed up. But what you saw in the mainstream media, which is owned by pharma, 60 to 70% of their total revenues comes from pharma, billions of dollars every year in ads, and not for the reason of through drug ads, which are illegal in every country except New Zealand and the United States. And they advertise in mainstream media. You'll see drug ads everywhere all the time, not to sell drugs, but to control the coverage, to control the narrative, to control the reporting. And it's obvious, the pro-pharma, pro-vaccine bias, not just in mainstream medicine, which is also controlled by pharma, but in mainstream media, totally controlled by pharma, is obvious. The number of news stories on vaccine injuries is nearly zero. And the number of pro-vaccine stories is, in the millions, probably at this point, if you look at all outlets historically. So anyway, this woman stands up, tells her story. She said, I have to tell you my story. I said, sure. And this was in the vaccine part of the seminar before I got into the immune system and natural immune support and nutrition and herbal medicine. And I came in, I put my baby down to sleep. came in the next morning into her crib, unfortunately not co-sleeping, that's the best, and the baby was dead. So she went to she was, I mean, obviously, imagine that, your baby's dead in the crib. I think there was blood coming out of some orifice. I mean, it was just horrifying. I mean, the worst thing, baby wasn't breathing, baby had expired overnight. So, long story short, she was told to shut up by the, oh, it was a coincidence, so sorry. The usual nonsense from pediatricians who get 70 to 80% of their gross practice revenues from vaccines. Vaccines are the source of the vast majority of pediatric practice revenue. This, I was told at another seminar on vaccines and the immune system that I taught in Austin, Texas, where a 25-year pediatrician came up to me on the break. He said, I want you to know two things. One, I agree with everything you've said. That was amazing. And two, you should know that my colleagues, he got out of all of his insurance contracts. He had a cash practice, didn't have to follow, the ridiculous standards of care in pediatrics, which is all these vaccines, without evidence. And he got out of the whole thing a few years earlier. Of course, had a waiting list practice, board-certified pediatrician who doesn't vaccinate. And he said, you should know that the reason my colleagues in pediatrics do not question the narrative, the story, they don't challenge the cult, the religion of vaccines, is because, and this is what he said, not what I said, 70 to 80% of our gross revenues, total revenues into a pediatric practice, is from vaccines. If we stop vaccinating, we don't have a practice. And I was willing to take that risk and, hired lawyers to get out of all of his insurance contracts, went to a purely, patient pay model, instantly had a waiting list of several months because parents crave pediatricians who will look at their kid, not that you really need a pediatrician in general, but unless there's an emergency, and for, I guess basic checkup, I suppose, but who are not going to criticize and pontificate and coerce and demean and belittle. I've heard that exact story dozens of times, if not hundreds of times, from parents in the practice. Like, I think I need a new pediatrician. I say, you don't need a pediatrician at all. You just, unless there's an emergency, you should have a family physician that you can consult with. That's what I have for my own kids, a non-drug happy, non-coercive, non-pontificating family practice doctor who does, annual physical checkups. That's cool. Take the kids in once a year, no problem. That's what he said. He said, we don't question what the CDC tells us and what the pharma tells us because it's most of our practice income. So he, as I said, had a very busy practice of patients willing, families willing to pay him for his time, and knowing that he was actually going to do what was best for the kid, not just what would, keep his practice revenues flowing from the vaccine schedule. Anyway, this woman started making some noise, and she was just, oh, I'm sorry, it was a coincidence. That's the usual thing. Finally, she said to the practice that she took her kid into, that killed her kid, that she was going to the press with this story, and that's when they started to pay attention to her. She was going to talk to all the local newspapers in Coeur d'Alene about what happened to her kid. Only at that time was she taken seriously, when she threatened to sort of go to the papers, as the old saying would go. Anyway, long story short, she went through the whole process of suing the government for what the pediatrician did and the vaccine companies did, creating an inherently unsafe product, according to the Supreme Court. They're unavoidably unsafe in the Supreme Court ruling. And And long story short, she was given $250,000 and had to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which said, if you talk about anything that happened related to your trial and the expert testimony, because she had to hire pediatric neurologists, other physicians, other specialists. It was very expensive. But thankfully she had the means to do that. A lot of parents don't. And expert testimony over weeks, and she won. They said, yep, the vaccine killed your kid. Here's a check for $250,000. If you talk about any of this to anybody ever, you have to give the money back. So just from her standing up at this seminar and telling her story, she was risking losing, had to give back all that money. And she's like, I don't care anymore. I have to tell the world what happened to my son. And she has been. And I don't think they've asked for the money. So it was one of, millions of stories of injuries and deaths caused by the vaccine cult. And there's many reasons for the vaccine cult. One of it is purely mercenary, which is profits for pediatric practices, and income for pharma companies, which is a significant, about $50 billion a year globally, is the last I heard. Not counting COVID shots, that was a bonanza. And so there's a profit motive, right, for pediatricians, for the pediatric associations that are given massive cash from pharma. It's major income for pharma, but not primarily from the vaccine sales. Vaccines are low margin items. What the drug industry is so protective against their vaccine schedule is because of the downstream revenues in drug sales for managing the diseases, asthma, eczema, autism spectrum, autoimmune disease, diabetes. The list is, hundreds of conditions, diseases caused by vaccines. That's what they're interested in. Now you're talking, over time, trillions of dollars, not 50 billion, but maybe 500 billion. I don't know. But a lot more than the direct revenues from the vaccines. Part of that vaccine cost goes to fund the program, the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which has paid out more than $5 billion with a B dollars in, like this mother's claim, that $250,000 that she was given for her son's murder was part of that. And so the cost of the program is baked into the cost of each vaccine. So the drug companies don't pay a dime out of any of that. They just add it to the cost of the vaccine. So it's paid for by the insurance company or whoever. But it's none of it comes out of that. So, and all of those expert testimonies from the neurologists and pediatrician, whatever experts the parents bring in, all of that is sealed under a federal seal and can never be revealed to the public. And they do that because there's so much evidence of harm in all of these cases, thousands of cases over the decades. And all of the evidence is basically government property and never sees the light of day. Because if it did, then what's happening now would happen a lot faster. Thanks to Bobby and the Maha movement and the Maha moms that got him involved 20 years ago. That's the game. So that's all the profit side. There's a more nefarious side, and again, the drug companies are mostly interested in the downstream sales of drugs to manage diseases caused by the vaccine schedule, which are enormous. And we went over the Henry Ford study proving that the sickest kids with chronic disease are fully vaccinated. And Paul Thomas and James Lyons Weiler's study at his pediatric practice in Oregon before his license was revoked. And he's been on the show a couple of times talking about this story. Same thing. In his looking at these tens of thousands of children in his clinic database, they looked at vaccinated, fully vaccinated, partially vaccinated, unvaccinated, and it was obvious. Same as Henry Ford discovered, the healthiest children in America are fully unvaccinated, like my kids. And the sickest children in America are fully vaccinated according to the baseless schedule. Now, remember, the vaccine schedule, vaccines in the schedule are never evaluated as a group. FDA approves individual vaccines, does not look at groups of vaccines. We call this polypharmacy, administering multiple drugs at the same time. We see the adverse effects of this in the older population, where the average 60-year-old is taking 6 or 8 different meds. And so, which reminds me of another story from a seminar. It was a wonderful 25 years, I have to say. I was just very thankful. And I got to meet so many great practitioners, including this hospice nurse who came to the seminar. He wants a little attention. He wants a little attention. So I'm just going to hold him a little bit because he wants some attention. But anyway, a hospice nurse stood up at a seminar. Oh, it's a big yawn. A hospice nurse stood up in the seminar and talked about she sees every week hospice graduates. And this is a general pharma comment. Person's put on hospice, the supervising doctor comes in and will often take patients off of all their medications. Why? Because they're about to die. They're in hospice because of imminent death. So take them off all their statins and blood pressure medicine. They take them off everything, and then they get well and go home. The hospice nurse said, this literally happens every week. We send people home, and she's in a big hospice unit at a hospital. We send people home every week from hospice, and they live for years. She's done follow-up on some of them, and just to check in, hey, how are you doing? You were about to die. How are you doing? And they're like, I'm doing great. And why? Because they were taken off all their medications, right? So, and this one of the physicians here in Colorado, who was a standard process doctor, wonderful man, Dr. Beek. He's passed away since. But he was the head of, he was an MD, MPH, in charge of public health for the city of Chicago in the 1960s. And there was a hospital strike on his watch. All the hospitals went on strike for some reason, and the hospitals basically closed. I'm not sure what happened with all the critical people, but I didn't ask about the details. So all the hospitals closed for several weeks in Chicago, and the total mortality rate in Chicago went down 90%, right? And this is before it became a war zone because of gun control and many other factors affecting the communities there. A lot of issues there we're not going to get into today. Fatherless homes possibly being the most significant cause of crime and gang activity in general. And then strict gun laws, that's another factor, but most of it's gang violence. And so we have to look to the causes of that. A lot of that is fatherless homes. It's a very successful program in an inner city where dads show up just to spend time with kids who don't have a dad in the household. And these kids do incredibly well. They don't go to jail. They're not in a gang. Their grades remarkably improve. They're happier. They're healthier. And they're doing great because they have, it's not their dad, but a dad around as part of their life. Give them some guardrails, give them some inspiration, some guidance. Anyway, wandering around a bit with that, but it's an important point. So in Chicago in the 60s, total mortality went down 90% during the hospital strike. And Dr. Beek, since he was in charge of all of public health in Chicago, had all the data to confirm that. And he said he did a reanalysis. He said he couldn't believe it. So then he was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He reanalyzed all the data, and it was absolutely true. And he said you couldn't, and it wasn't just because, it wasn't like there were no more car crashes in Chicago. He said this was death caused by the hospital, iatrogenic mortality, we call it. And it was a huge factor. It was a huge factor. Anyway, so the potential of this, again, it's not done till it's done, but what might possibly happen is the United States vaccine schedule, which we just looked at, will become a lot smaller. And this is, kind of a huge thing. What happened was with hepatitis B, they looked at the data, the actual data, never been done before. Nobody bothered to look at the data. Like, is this thing helping? The answer was no. And they're like, why are we, what's the medical rationale? What's the scientific basis? What's the evidence basis for vaccinating babies within hours of birth with a vaccine for sexually transmitted or IV needle introduced disease? And it's never made sense. And the answer given by pediatricians, oh, well, it'll build up immunity over time. That's not true at all. Babies don't make antibodies. So giving drugs to stimulate antibody production in babies that don't make antibodies, at least for several months, is insane. So the 2, 4, and 6 month vaccines are meaningless and without basis because, and just ask, do you do titer testing on newborns? Do you do titer testing looking for antibodies in the blood at 2 months? No. At 4 months? No. At 6 months? No. Maybe at a year you could do titer testing because they're starting to make antibodies. It happens gradually. It's not overnight, not like on their first birthday. Suddenly they have humoral immunity. It varies. Some kids might be younger than a year, some kids might be later than a year, but on average. So this was a huge development, another massive MAHA win, and they're going for the belly of the beast, which is the vaccine schedule, the vaccine cult schedule. So here's the next clip. This is from CBS, deep and this really, anyway, pharma shill, CBS. Like any mainstream media, I'm not singling them out. They're all like that. If they accept advertising, like massive advertising dollars from pharma, they're buying a favorable narrative for their products. So anyway, let's listen to this activist pretending to be a reporter talk about this.
This week, we saw a big sell-off in biotech stocks following these reports that the FDA, which you used to run at the first part of the Trump administration, is now going to require one study to clinch approval of vaccines. You were one of the former commissioners who put out this really extraordinary editorial in the New England Journal of Medicine arguing that the FDA and top vaccine regulator, Dr. Vinay Prasad, are changing policies in a way that's going to slow down new and better vaccines. What specifically is the problem you see? Because this isn't just Hep B. This is the vaccines of the future, you're saying, just won't be created.
Now, let's just get clear. This guy was before, okay, a couple of things we've got to clarify here, and I'm going to save that spot. That was significant. He was FDA director during Trump 1, the 45, so to speak. And here's why. So that's Gottlieb. Gottlieb was a pharma president. So he was a pharma president that got brought into the administration. Why? Because Trump is not a politician. He didn't know in the first administration just how stuff worked. And as a fabulously successful CEO, delegates a lot. And he's like, find me the best people, and I'm going to hire them, and they're going to guide me on all this. So he hired the swamp while trying to drain the swamp out of inexperience. He just didn't know. So if you look at the initial crew in the cabinet, in the government, he basically, experts showed up and said, oh, he's the best, she's the best. Bring them in. Oh, great, I want the best. And these are all swamp creatures. These are all pharma operatives, including Gottlieb, who you're about to hear from, who was a pharma president. I think it might have been Pfizer, but I don't remember which vaccine company it was. It might have been Merck. I don't recall. But he was a pharma president who got brought in to head the FDA. This was standard procedure in the revolving door at HHS. Pharma folks come into the government. Government folks, once they leave, get cushy positions like Julie Geberdine, who was head of CDC, became global head of vaccines for Merck, like within weeks of finishing her time as head of CDC. So, this is just, it was just so corrupt. So what you're about to hear is a swamp creature who was a pharma president, became head of FDA, as she pointed out, and it took Trump time to realize that he was being duped and given bad advice from all these swamp creatures that he had actively brought in because he was told by experts that they were the best people for the job. He didn't know. He's a businessman. So understandably, and then he realized towards, in the later half of that first administration, that he brought in like really, really bad people who were ultra corrupt and financially conflicted. None of that has now. Then he had, after the 2020 election was stolen, obviously, then he had 4 years to figure out how to not hire the swamp. And so now we have like a dream team of folks like Dr. Bhattacharya and Bobby Kennedy, who are running things actually based on evidence, not based on industry, which is a big thing. So anyway, you need a little background. You're about to hear from Scott Gottlieb, total swamp creature, pharma executive, of course was made head of FDA. That's what they typically did. All the, they bring in, bankers to chair the Federal Reserve. That's a whole other story. They bring in all these industry people into the government to regulate their industry, which was, of course, never going to go well except for that industry. So anyway, you needed some background to set up swamp creature Gottlieb, super despicable guy, who, of course, was ultra pro pharma because that was his job until like hours before he became head of FDA. And of course, CBS is going to give him all the airtime he wants with this, activist pretending to be a reporter. And, on the averages, 70% of her big salary is drug money, right? So if 70% of their revenues come from drug companies, that means 70% of her salary comes from, companies like Gottlieb. So anyway, you need a little backstory on this standard mainstream media hit piece on Bobby and everything that's going on in defense of pharma. And you're about to hear pharma guy explain why the new, unconflicted HHS is wrong.
Right. So Vinay Prasad, who is the head of the Biologics Center, also oversees the vaccine division. He also has been appointed the head of biostatistics, the chief medical officer of the agency, and the chief scientific officer. So he occupies a lot of positions. Put out a memo saying that they're going to do away with or move away from what they call immunobridging studies. These are studies that allow you, for well-validated vaccines like the flu vaccine, to be able to demonstrate each year that the vaccine, the new vaccine that's formulated against a circulating strain, can elicit antibodies that are effective against that particular strain, and that could be the basis of approval, rather than requiring new outcome studies every year to prove that the vaccine actually reduces the incidence of influenza.
Now, that was huge. He admitted it. He admitted it. Oh, this is so good. This is so good. So, there's two types of vaccine so-called efficacy or effectiveness. And he just told you both of them. One is laboratory efficacy. And this is even called in, I believe, all 50 states, on the books in all 50 states, or almost all 50 states, proof of immunity. This is a total crock. It's a scam. Part of the scam. Measuring antibodies, so this is laboratory evidence, laboratory efficacy, is called proof of immunity, which is absurd because lack of antibodies doesn't mean you're vulnerable, and presence of antibodies doesn't mean you're guaranteed protection. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And this is why you have waning protection. This is called secondary vaccine failure. You have primary failure, is that it never made antibodies. Secondary vaccine failure is typically the antibody stimulation wears off. And there you go. So what he's talking about is, well, just in the good old day, what Scott Gottlieb, pharma executive, vaccine manufacturer himself, just said was that we liked it in the good old days when I was in charge, and all we had to do was show antibodies on a blood test. And we were good to go. Hey, your vaccine works great. It stimulated antibody production, which is absurd. Like, if you understand anything about the immune system and the 6 areas of the immune system, only one of them of the 6 has to do with antibodies. It ignores cellular immunity or innate immunity. That's how babies don't get killed by infections within days of being alive, is that they have a very active cellular immune system. Plus, they have maternal immunoglobulins, which are antibodies, transmitted by the mother in breast milk, we hope. So, so Gottlieb was like, I like the good old days when all you had to do was show them a blood test. And we didn't have to show the second type of vaccine efficacy, which they hate doing. They hate this. They despise this, is actually, does it help? Look at actual outcomes. Let's compare a bunch of people who got this flu shot, in this case, with a bunch of people who didn't get the flu shot, and let's see how it goes. Let's see who did better. Did the folks who rolled up their arm for a flu shot have less flu, less sickness in general, better health outcomes overall than the folks who didn't? They hate that. And now the new FDA is requiring that. You can't just show us a blood test. You've got to show us efficacy, clinical efficacy, not laboratory efficacy, which is totally different. So there is no vaccine clinical efficacy, right? So if they applied this standard to all vaccines, which they did already in the Henry Ford study, which kids are better off, there will be no vaccines. There will be no childhood vaccines if you had to show outcomes efficacy, not just blood test, so-called, ridiculously called proof of immunity, which is nonsense, efficacy. So that's what he just said. He's pining for the old days when you didn't have to prove efficacy at all. You just had to show an antibody titer, as if that mattered, which it doesn't. It's one tiny part of it. I'm not saying zero. I'm not saying it's zero relevance. It has minor relevance in the context of an actual holistic understanding of the immune system, which includes the innate or cellular immunity, the interferon system, the microbiome, the endocannabinoid system. It includes all of these other things which don't have to do with antibodies, right? So if you have robust cellular immunity, where does that come from? Nutrition. If you have good nutrition, diet and supplements, you'll have good cellular immunity, and you're not likely to get sick from anything. You're not likely to develop any type of infection or sickness unless it's like a purifying, low-grade fever for a couple of days, amplify metabolic rate to clear toxins, kind of an old, naturopathic type understanding before they were taken over by reductionism. Understanding sometimes you just get sick for a couple of days as a detox. If your body just accumulates stuff, you need to turn up the heat, ramp up metabolic rate, burn stuff out, and you're fine. It's not really sickness, it's more of a therapeutic cleansing. But anyway, so that's what you just heard Pharma Boy say, that, oh boy, the new FDA is so mean. We actually have to show outcomes benefits, right? Which they're in. The flu shots are among the least effective vaccines ever produced. And the last flu shot study, I didn't prepare it for today, showed that there was a negative efficacy, which happens regularly, or minimal efficacy, but there's actually negative efficacy in the last flu season. So anyway, let's listen to Pharma Boy pine more for the good old days when you didn't actually have to show any benefit from your drug.
For established vaccines where we know that antibody production is a good correlate for immunity, this has been a long-standing practice. We do it for flu vaccine, we do it in COVID certainly, we do it for things like pneumococcal vaccine, the vaccine for pneumococcal disease, where we look at serotypes, circulating bacterial serotypes. This allows us to update vaccines as these viral and bacterial strains change and as the composition of the strains change in time to provide protection for the fall respiratory season. If they move away from this, which is what he said they plan to do, we're just not going to be able to update vaccines each season as we've done historically to accommodate whatever the circulating strain is.
And so he only inserted one lie, that antibodies equals immunity. He only outright lied once, which is unusual. That was kind of low for him and for CBS and for mainstream media in general, not just CBS. So that was a standard media hit piece on the new MAHA-oriented HHS and CDC and FDA. So anyway, that was a classic defense. So we can't talk about all of this without hearing from Bobby Kennedy himself. So here's a clip from Bobby on the statistical shenanigans. I believe this was an older clip, but relevant clip for sure. So let's hear Bobby, and who, by the way, admitted that he lost his voice, his permanent voice damage from a flu shot. His voice was permanently damaged, and again, this was not like inside baseball. This was him at a rally, right? This was a campaign stop, or it may have just been a health freedom meeting. I'm not actually, that part I'm not sure. But it was a public event where you can hear him explain, I lost my voice after, 20 years. I got my 20th flu shot. Got it every year for 20 years. The last one destroyed his vocal cords. And that's why he speaks the way he does. He has if you look at old Bobby clips, when he was an environmental lawyer, suing Monsanto, or not Monsanto, but all the polluters and Riverkeeper lawsuits and all that. He had a very powerful voice, like his dad and his uncle. But it was only destroyed by a flu shot. So now, yay, hopefully they'll generalize this to all the vaccines. I think they might. Is you have to show clinical efficacy, outcomes efficacy, not just antibody titers, which are meaningless. All right, so let's hear Bobby. Can't do a MAHA update without hearing from the man himself.
The vaccine is ineffective for the first 6 weeks after the first shot. I'm assuming a two-shot, a two-dose vaccine like Pfizer or Moderna.
This is COVID.
And that during that period, the COVID infection rate goes up and the death rate goes up. And the data, the official data, do not count you as vaccinated until 2 weeks after the second shot. So the deaths that happen during that first 6 weeks are attributed to unvaccinated people, to the unvaccinated group, which is not, it's a trick. It's a statistical trick. Then the vaccine appears to provide immunity, and good immunity during the first month or 2 months, and then a precipitous decline, a waning that happens very, very quickly and very precipitously, so that by the 7th month, it has lapsed into negative efficacy. And what that means is that after 7 months, if you had that vaccine, you are more likely to get COVID than somebody who has never been vaccinated. And this data is holding up across every country in the world.
Yeah, so that was an older clip on COVID. This was probably during his campaign, I would guess, or in general. So that was a general clip, but it's the same basic idea. Is that the vaccine cult is based on faked statistics or incomplete statistics. So it's a massive issue. And now that's starting to end. Again, we all want Bobby and HHS and everybody to go faster and get rid of these damn COVID shots, which are killing people every day, injuring millions, and killing, the death rate is astounding. So that is that. We had a question, and I wanted to give you at least one answer to this. So we had a question come in. This is from Carol. Hi, Carol. So glad you're with us today. Yeah, there is a definite concern that the as they're called tech bros, the tech industry has infiltrated MAHA at the government, at the Bobby level, so to speak. And Bobby saying, in a hearing that the entire country should be using wearable devices to track health metrics was a bit of a concern. So I'll just show you what this just came out 4 days ago. And I'll give you the link here. And I'll get it on the watch page as well. And this is HHS AI strategy to transform agency operations. So this is, what's going on. Now, AI, and I just did a video on this, we'll have it out soon, is not bad or good. It's like the internet. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing. It's how it's used that really matters. And so that link will take you to this page on the use of AI in healthcare. So this is, again, there's a positive aspect to this. Bobby talked about is unnecessary. So you can find all that at that link. And this is, right off of hhs.gov. Now, Bobby, declared an end to animal testing for pharma drugs and pharma products, which is great. right? They're just kind of doing bad things to animals, which is, again, if it prevents human suffering, then that might be okay. But what Bobby pointed out is with new, AI-assisted modeling, they can eliminate animal testing just from using technology. Like we don't need to test, cosmetics on animals, for example, if we use AI to do whatever statistical model. I don't know the details of that, but he's like, we don't need to test drugs on animals. We can, which again is not ethically wrong because the value of a human life is greater. However, as an animal lover, I'm not too keen on it. I'm not fond of it, but I understand it might be a necessary evil in a minimum use to protect human beings, who I, as much as I love animals, I value people even more. But Bobby said we're going to phase that out because the technology allows us to do so, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. So, so that is more awesomeness happening, and so let's see. Yeah, so that was that, and just as a let me just actually check both of our pages. Yeah, no, Dr. Hinder's pointing out they did have 4 people vote against the hepatitis B change. So there is definitely some pharma influence there, perhaps. Yeah, I would agree completely that it may not be like perfectly clean, for sure, but certainly better, obviously, because other than the chance that would have happened otherwise would have been exactly 0. Absolutely. Just is ridiculous. So on that, this is a couple of things on this. One was, this was one of the ACIP, I wanted to show you the testimony of one of the ACIP members, Dr. Levy, and the cult dogma, the lie of the vaccine cult, has been that U.S. children must be vaccinated for this sexually transmitted, IV transmitted disease on the day of birth. So let's listen to one of the testimonies against this nonsense, and he voted against this. Again, they're freaking out because these folks are not necessarily, or at least as much, bought out by pharma the way the previous crew, like Dr. Paul Offit was, total pharma operative.
I think that one of the slides that we saw earlier today suggests that the policy in the U.S. is completely misaligned with many countries that I want to assume care about their children just as much as we do. And they are potentially not convinced by the very confident arguments that you and others are making, both about the safety and the need and the benefits of having a birth dose for babies that were born to mothers that are tested negative for Hep B. And just about the confidence, I think that, and I'm going to connect it to something else, but I think that the same speakers that we heard today and the same organizations were very adamant that the mRNA vaccines are very safe for children and young people. So safe and so effective. And I guess that we heard recently some evidence that maybe that confidence was not necessarily correct. So I just suggest that maybe we'll be a little bit more humble and less confident, and also look on what other people are doing, and not present the discussion as just the mere discussion, or the having different opinions as something that has to do with being evil or being irresponsible, because I don't think that that's the basis for a scientific discussion. Thank you.
There you go. So he's just pointing out the obvious, that other countries, and like they love their kids too, don't do this. And there's no negative outcomes from doing this. Now, This is Marty Makary starting. This was amazing that this happened, but I'll show it to you. This was on another pharma outlet. This is NBC, another mainstream pharma-controlled outlet. And here's Marty Makary. This was wild. Again, it's so much worse than what he's saying. I mean, there's 20 million people murdered by COVID shots worldwide, a lot of them in the U.S., because we had the most intensively COVID jabbed population in the world, with the worst COVID outcomes, of course. Those are tightly related. But here's Marty Makary, head of FDA, replaced that Gottlieb bozo, and the pharma guy, and he's admitting that children were killed by the COVID shot. Again, this is a tiny fraction of the reality, but the fact that he's just starting to reveal some of the data on how catastrophic the genocide jab has been, working as designed, is amazing.
Past weekend, there was a memo from one of your leaders, and in that memo they said that the FDA had found at least 10 children who died because they got the COVID vaccine, but there was no science to back it up.
So in science, we often release top-line data while we put together the details of that data to make it public. It will be public.
And yet we still haven't seen the data. And today you have a dozen of your predecessors who published a letter that said that data was looked at and their researchers came to a different conclusion.
Well, that's not actually what they said. And many of those, by the way, are paid by big pharma folks, and they're entitled to their opinion. But we have a different concept on vaccine regulation.
Past weekend, there was a memo.
Well, there you go. So they're doing all this damage control, and of course the mainstream media is going to help them do damage control, but they're just, there's so much on defense. It's quite remarkable. But FDA has acknowledged child deaths linked to COVID vaccines, which is, again, just the start of what's going to happen. And so this is pretty exciting stuff. And also wanted to announce a book launch from the greatest Surgeon General of all time. And we'll just let him do a little plug for his book. And this is one of my favorite people, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, or Ladapo, I think. And
of just more medications.
The sane state of Florida, which is also moving to end all forced vaccination, delicately called mandates, but this is forced vaccination of children, forcing children to receive pharmaceutical products or any product. So here's the awesome Joseph Ladapo. By the way, got his MD and Masters in Public Health from Harvard, which doesn't mean anything since Harvard has become a leftist activist indoctrination center. But maybe the medical school, is still pretty good and competitive. And anyway, he's a really smart guy, well credentialed. And let's hear. And he just came out with a book called Transcend Fear. And this, look at that. Forward by Bobby Kennedy, right? Afterword by Gavin DeBecker, who's an amazing guy. Also, in part, was Bobby Kennedy's security detail during his campaign, since the Biden administration, for the first time in history, denied Secret Service coverage to a presidential candidate. That's part of the ultra-corrupt Biden regime. But anyway, here's Joe Ladapo, very critical of the nonsense of COVID lockdowns and vaccines, and a staunch advocate of choice, of medical freedom, and no coercion. So let's hear from him.
we're going to be leaning into this area of psychiatric medication prescriptions for children. So that's an area we're going to be leaning into. It's an area that is, really an enormous concern. Just kids are absolutely being prescribed too much of these medications too often.
Now, just pause there. The statistic is 20%. 1 in 5, might be more now. At least 1 in 5 American children has been prescribed a psychotropic drug, which is horrifying. So we're drugging up our kids, partly to deal with the side effects from the vaccine schedule, causing autism and autism spectrum and ADD and ADHD, causing a whole range of issues mentally, cognitively, behaviorally with children. And then that's awesome if you're a drug company, because what'll happen, so you cause behavioral problems and cognitive mental problems in children with your untested vaccine schedule, as a whole, which is now going to happen, yay. And then you have other drugs in other categories, other classes of drugs, to manage the symptoms of the diseases and conditions caused by your vaccine schedule. So anyway, it's 20%, which is crazy.
And, the data are showing that it seems to put them on a treadmill, if you will, yep, of just more medications, that just getting prescribed these medications, whether it's for ADHD or other things, is just a prescription for getting more in the future. So it's a major problem. It has not received enough attention. And the fact that, as I've learned from many of you, that there absolutely are alternatives, whether it's changes in diet or environmental changes that absolutely help kids with these behavioral issues. Those opportunities are there. And this reflexive reach for powerful medications in very young, still evolving minds is just, it's a catastrophe. So that's an area we're going to be leaning more into in Florida.
Well done. There you have the awesome Joseph Ladapo. And they hate this guy because he's so well credentialed. Harvard MD, MPH. It's just hard to discount this guy as a whack job. And so they're, it's pretty remarkable. Now, on the informed consent piece, and this is pretty huge, that Bobby has clearly stated the commitment to medical freedom as HHS secretary, not just on the campaign trail, but absolutely defending informed consent. So what happened was a tyrannical school district or school, of course, they apparently vaccinated a kid without parental consent. Now, and again, in the Biden regime, this would have been celebrated as a public health win, but there's a new sheriff in town. And so instead of celebrating, yay, force vaccinate a kid against their will, against the parents' will, this is what's happening now. So let's just listen to this clip as we wind down our show today. And then I'm going to play you a little Christmas music. Here's Bobby. And I was really happy about this because it was one kid, right? So that's terrible. Every vaccinated kid is a tragedy. But this is what we're hearing here is the kid was a catalyst for policy, or at least an additional impetus for defending medical freedom, like they're doing in Florida, like they've already done in Idaho. By law, in Idaho, there are no more forced vaccinations. There's no forced vaccination in the state of Idaho. So, and now Florida is in process. They're not quite there yet with legislation and a bill signed into law by the governor, but they're headed strongly in that direction, led by the awesome Joe Ladapo. So let's listen to Bobby. And again, this is about a case, but it's a lot bigger than this one kid in the Midwest. This is Bobby using this case to affirm a commitment to uncoerced, fully informed parental consent.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS secretary. Today, I'm announcing decisive steps that HHS is taking to defend something that is absolutely fundamental in this country, a parent's right to guide their child's health decisions. That right is not optional. It's not negotiable, and under the Trump administration, it will not be ignored. HHS has launched an investigation into a troubling incident in the Midwest. A school administered a federally funded vaccine to a child without the parent's consent and despite a legally recognized state exemption. When any institution, a school, a doctor's office, a clinic, disregards a religious exemption, it doesn't just break trust, it also breaks the law. It fractures the sacred bond between families and the people entrusted with their child's care. And we're not going to tolerate it. The Health Resources and Services Administration is sending a letter to HRSA-supported health center grant recipients, underscoring a simple fact. Federal funding requires compliance with federal and state laws that protect parental rights. Parents have another right that every American should know about, and that's the right of access to their children's health records. HIPAA establishes that right of access. If you have the legal authority to make decisions for your child, then you should have the right to see their records. No delays, no secrets, no excuses. So today we are launching compliance reviews of providers and major healthcare systems to ensure that they give parents timely access to their children's information. In addition, our Office for Civil Rights has issued a letter reminding healthcare providers of their clear legal duty to give parents access to their children's medical records. If a provider stands between you and your child, HHS is going to step in. Let me be clear. Schools and healthcare systems cannot sideline parents. If a provider ignores consent, violates an exemption, or keeps parents in the dark, HHS will act quickly and decisively. We will use every tool we have to protect families and restore accountability. The Vaccines for Children program must never become a workaround to bypass parents. We are reviewing how states and districts process exemptions to ensure the program follows the law, not the other way around. If you believe that your rights or your child's rights have been violated, then you can file a complaint with our Office for Civil Rights at hhs.gov/OCR/complaints. That's hhs.gov/OCR/complaints. Parents know their children best. Parents love their children the most, and HHS will always defend their voice, their authority, and their rightful place at the center of their children's healthcare decisions. Thank you very much.
That is one of the most significant announcements like ever related to children's health. That is astounding. So wanted to close with that one today because that was so great. So, and it also puts insane states that hate parents and children and rights and medical freedom, just to slightly exaggerate, like California. There's no vaccine exemptions in California, in New York, and other states. And Bobby just said, religious exemptions must be honored. So whether he was referring to all states, which would mean he's going to, or the federal government is going to take action against the crazy states who have trampled parental rights and the ethical mandate of informed consent, which means fully informed of all possible risks as well as benefits, and uncoerced free voluntary consent. This hasn't existed with vaccines in decades. So what Bobby is saying is they're going to protect parental choice, parental rights, medical freedom, fully informed, uncoerced consent, religious exemptions, and again, we don't know if that's just the 45 states that have them, or if in West Virginia, very significantly, they're restoring religious exemption in West Virginia. Hasn't, it's not done, but it's massively underway. Or if it applies to all states. So we'll see. But that announcement was massive because that goes right to the heart of the vaccine cult, which is to, again, this is totalitarian medical tyranny, to have the state make decisions that override parental choice or override parental wishes, right? And that's the standard. That's how it goes in totalitarian regimes. Is the parents are an annoyance because they're the only thing that stands between the state and the child. The state meaning the government, and at a state or local or federal level, and the child. The only thing standing in between a child and the government is their parents. And that's why totalitarian regimes like California, New York, and others do everything they can to sideline parents and basically say, the state controls your kid, which is, that's the totalitarian dream, is for parents to merely produce children that the state indoctrinates and controls and makes decisions for, right? That's how it is in those kind of crazy states where there is no informed consent. There is no parental rights. There is no parental choice, medical freedom, or informed consent. So that's super massive, and I'm just very excited about that. The corruption of American healthcare by pharma and by the insurance industry is so deep that it's just very, very intense to unwind that, to oppose that, to fight against that, to undo that. So, again, kudos to Bobby. Again, we all wish he could do more in less time and get rid of those damn COVID shots, which are, we talk about week after week, have just been a complete human catastrophe. But these are big wins. We had a lot to catch up on. A lot of big wins in the health freedom space. It's just very, very significant. So this is big deal. Let me give you the link, and please share this everywhere. This is, again, huge win for medical freedom and parental rights against the tyranny of the medical mafia and the vaccine cult. So it's pretty massive stuff. I'm just going to do a quick scan, make sure I didn't miss anything on my list of things I wanted to share today. Okay. Yep. Okay, there's that. Yeah, it was a little wacky, Bobby recommending hormone replacement for every female over 40. That was a little strange. But anyway. Okay. All right, I think that's good for today. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. And I wanted to wish you and yours, we're in the Christmas season now, which goes through the Epiphany on January 6th. informally starts at Thanksgiving. And this is this is that's right. There's one more clip. Bob Malone. Just I wanted to show you the source material here. Here's Bob Malone affirming. It's a short clip that they're looking at the entire schedule, not just Hep B. This is amazing.
Now, there's some things that are going to come down. There has been a lot of interest in revisiting the childhood vaccine schedule. You're going to see, and I can speak to this because it's on the agenda, you're going to see that that is taken up as an issue in this upcoming meeting next week.
Massive.
You're going to see that there is a very active discussion and some votes about the hepatitis B vaccine. You're going to see that there's presentations comparing the American childhood vaccine schedule with the world's childhood vaccine schedules. And it makes it clear that the U.S. schedule is really not consistent with international norms. Now, there's some things.
So that's just what we were talking about before. And, more power to them. It looks like they do have a couple of pharma folks and, who are in the mix. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here today. Great show. Thanks for your engagement, participation. I really love Christmas music. I'm going to play a couple Christmas carols. Not sure which ones, but I wanted to wish you and yours a blessed Christmas and holiday season. And hope you and yours are well. We'll see you next week. And please let us know if you have guests that you'd like to request be on the show. If there are topics you'd like to explore, please let us know. We're really interested in hearing from you. Any topic requests, guest requests, guests you could suggest. And then, of course, please take advantage of our school. This is at michaelgaeta.com. And this is the website for our school for holistic health and natural functional medicine. Health trainings for the public and practitioners. There's a survey here, help shape our 2026 courses. We've gotten a pile of feedback, which we're using now as we're building out our course schedule for next year. It's going to be amazing. Let us know what you think. Also, on our courses page, you'll see our about 60 courses in natural health and natural functional medicine. Pretty awesome. If you missed our COVAX Carnage and Immune Support course, it's available as a self-study course. And please take advantage of all that. And you'll see here right at the top, the clinic. Go to our patients link and schedule a consultation. I recommend everybody have a consult once a year at least as sort of a functional medicine checkup. Review your lab, see how you're doing, come up with some next steps. If you haven't had that done in a year, it would be a good idea. So all of that is at michaelgaeta.com. And visit us on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. We're all over the place. So come visit us and keep up with our many social platforms. And blessings to you and yours. We'll see you next week. Okay. Oh, I know. He's been very interested in some attention. So, okay. Here we go. Okay, gotcha. All right. Oops. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, we'll try a little bit here. Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to our